biggest things that new homeschooling moms, and actually sometimes even older homeschooling moms, struggle with is confidence. And unfortunately, I think part of the problem is that the school system that we went through has made us feel like we are not capable of homeschooling our own children, and that you go in with your confidence already undermined because you're not a teacher. So we've come up with 5 things to remember to help you this year continue to homeschool with confidence. Surely the first one that we've identified, which is quite controversial because parents have a misunderstanding of what curriculum they're allowed to use in South Africa, is that to homeschool with confidence, you do not have to follow a CAPS curriculum. Do you want to jump into that one?
Right. So a CAPS curriculum is based on what is used in the school system. And so many new homeschoolers choose an online school or one of these highly structured school at home programs that are based on CAPS because they think it's going to give them the security of knowing that their children are doing the same as they would be doing in school.
Mm.
And then you and I get the teary phone calls and the desperate emails from mothers who are just floundering. Their kids hate it. They're struggling to keep up, or it's boring. There's drama, there's fighting, and there's just no joy in the homeschooling, and they just don't know what to do. And it doesn't happen to everybody, but if you are feeling that this is not, as joyful an experience as you would like it to be, you don't have to stick with a CAPS curriculum.
Mm.
Sometimes we learn lessons the hard way and we have to tweak and change the plan. And you won't mess up your children's education if you change a few things, especially the first couple of years. We all did that.
Mm.
And that's a life lesson for them to see. You try something, you learn, you tweak it, you try again, you improve. And that's how we learn things in life.
Yeah.
We don't always get things right the first time. And there isn't one right way to homeschool or to educate children.
Mm.
So if CAPS isn't working for your children or you or your family, you don't have to stick with it. The law says we can choose any curriculum that's in the best interest of the child.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the second point, that if any curriculum is sabotaging the joy in your homeschooling, then change it.
Mm. You're free to change it. There is no curriculum police standing over your shoulder saying to you that you have to see this through. It's not a rule. Parents in that place often are worried about, in particular, switching on maths programs, but we can say maths is maths. It very, very little variance in the programs. Sometimes just some are mastery, some are immersion, but maths is maths. And if you continue to do that every single day through layer for layer, year by year, there are not going to be gaps. So people don't need to worry about ditching their curriculum if it's not. I would be more worried about the fact that we would need to be forcing ourselves and forcing our children to carry on with something because we have this fear of a gap. Because then it's not going to be a joyful, confident building journey that you're going to go on together. And every single parent that I've ever spoken to has a box or a cupboard or a shelf with curriculum that they've tried and they've realized it hasn't worked. I know that when we were using a literature-based program that we were importing from the States, at that point, I kind of got to a place that I could, with confidence, look at a cover of a book and maybe flick through a few pages and say, oh, well, that was money that wasn't well spent, but I'm going to pop that in a box. Maybe it will be suitable for somebody else. And I didn't feel guilty about it. I was able to determine what would be right for our family, and that this book about George Washington or whatever it was not going to cause harm to my children's long-term education. It was more important for us to joyfully embrace the disciplines that are involved and move forward. And I think that leads nicely into our third point, in that even if you have a bad day, even if you are not completing every single little task in what you have sent out and checking every block, you are still doing enough, correct?
Absolutely. We all struggle with this feeling of, am I doing enough? And I think, again, it stems from our own schooling, thinking or trying to remember how many projects and assignments and pages and worksheets we were forced to do to keep us busy for 6 hours a day at school. And you don't have to put your children through that drudgery. You know, if they've caught on a concept and they've, let's say in maths, done 5 correct sums and they're 100% correct, they don't need to do another 15 just to fill a time or fill pages. They've grasped the concept, move on. And with any subject, you know, there are ways to do it joyfully and there are ways to make it drudgery. But home education is one-on-one. So we get a lot done in much less time generally than kids sitting in a classroom where there's crowd control and discipline issues and all kinds of interruptions. So most homeschoolers who are diligent are doing enough. And if you're worrying, am I doing enough? That means you are self-assessing. And you know when you're having good days and bad days, and you're not going to be negligent. So if you're having that thought, you are doing enough. And that leads us into the next point, that there are no deadlines in life. So you will get to the end. You can talk more about that one.
Thanks. I was sitting here thinking, what did we actually mean by that? Because, you know, we have to get up at a certain time if we have a job. And we have sort of, if you go into the workspace, something that popped up the other day, and I was at a conversation, I was like, what is a KPA? Like, I don't even know what a KPA is, you know, key performance areas. And everybody was getting so uptight about a key performance area. And I was like, I'm so glad I'm self-employed. But the fact is that there is not this intense pressure anywhere else in the world in your future life where you have to have bells rung and you know, periods for maths and then 45 for English and then another 45 for science, and you know, those sorts of things are really arbitrary. It's institutionalized education, but outside of that, you don't see this. You see people sitting down, having a meeting, talking about how we can get this workflow going and, you know, what are the things that are creating hiccups. And that's exactly what it should be like in your home, is that we have this day that is stretching out before us. How are we going to correctly manage our time? How are we going to be good stewards with what is before us? What adventure are we going to go on? What discipline do we need to embrace? That is more of a relatable way of living, and we should be preparing our children for that, for when they migrate out of the homeschool into real life, is that they have the self-discipline to make sure that they are working steadily toward the goal. But this perception of I have to work toward a KPA stems from I have to learn a volume of work to pass a test because the deadline is the 11th of November. That's when I must have this knowledge. And it's not the way it works.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I mean also when I say that, there are deadlines in life. I mean, you have to pay your taxes by a certain date and there are deadlines you have to meet, but there's no deadlines as a homeschooling parent for launching your child into adulthood. They don't have to have mastered everything by 18.
Sure.
Some children will be mature enough and have completed a grade 12 credential matric by 18.
Yeah.
Some will do it earlier. Some may do it later. So you don't have to feel that if you're progressing slower because you've got a child with learning difficulties, that you're not doing enough and then beat yourself up. What you should be aiming to do is make sure that child is mastering each step, each lesson, and that you're building the child's self-confidence, their knowledge of their strengths, their weaknesses, so that when you get to the point where you know they're ready for the next stage of life, you can launch them. And you don't have to, you know, aim for the 18-year matric deadline. That's what I mean by that. But yes, you do have to teach them self-discipline, you know, to do things by the time, you know, I want the dishes packed away by supper time.
Yeah.
That's a little deadline. You do have to teach them that kind of discipline. But for living life, there's no deadline, there's no cutoff age for
Yeah, no
learning
ceiling.
anything.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, all three, well, yeah, all four ended at different times, and of our children, each were
Yeah.
ready to launch into the next thing. And then the last point that we've got is that you are allowed to build an education that suits your family's needs, because each of us are particular. You know, a family is we don't come out of a cookie cutter. So to try and import a education, which is this construct around a standardized type of person, um, is pretty irrelevant, because we are unique and we are individuals, and the family is this organic organism. So have the freedom. We give you permission to build a curriculum and build an education that suits your family. Remembering, yes, we must remember that our children need to meet the minimum standard in the government curriculum, but that truly with literature and outings and real life and doing those discipline subjects is one of the easiest things to do. But outside of that, this is your family, and you get to determine, when you're going to stop, you're going to get off, you're going to have an adventure, you're going to climb back on. It's like a road map. You want to get to Graafrenet, and it's going to take you 7 hours, but you can go off the main road anytime you want, when you have a need. Yeah.
Yeah. Take the scenic route. It's worth
Absolutely.
it.
Cool.